Okay.
Good morning, Vaughn.
Good morning, Roy.
And I want to welcome Vaughn Baker, president of Strategos. And if you're not familiar with Strategos, we specialize in intruder response training and education, in executive protection, and in tactical training for those who are specially trained to protect others. And we are still reeling, as difficult as it is to contemplate this, from the attacks that occurred in Paris over the weekend. And as difficult it is to evaluate what has happened, we want to not miss an opportunity to educate, because at Strategos here, that's what we do, is we educate people how to be safe, especially in public environments where you have a situation like you did in Paris over the weekend. So we don't want to just shake our heads and say, that's terrible. There is something here for us to learn. And as of this moment, more than 130 people lost their lives in multiple attacks. And so we want to glean what we're learning from news reports that have come out of Paris. And what Vaughn and I were talking about offline was that some of these reports indicate that people did hear strange things. They heard loud sounds that seemed out of the norm, but they did not take any action. And so we're not here to second guess or criticize anyone, but we want to understand what we can learn and apply it in our contemporary society and our application, because we do live in a dangerous world. Vaughn, what can you tell us about the reports that have come out and how we can make application of that information?
Well, first of all, we want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with the families of those that lost their lives and their loved ones. Just tremendous tragedy that occurred. And although not the worst, it's one of the worst that has occurred. But as far as lessons learned, watching the interviews of the people that survived the attacks at the different locations, there was a common theme that not only came forward in this attack, but in many attacks. And that was that many of them heard the sounds before they responded to them, or they delayed a proper response because they heard it and then they wanted to walk towards the sounds to confirm what they had actually heard. And this is very common, but it's not the right thing to do. It's a very natural response. And unfortunately, as in crisis situations, because you and I, we make decisions primarily off of our sight. About 80% of the information that we gather to make a decision comes from sight. People want to see what is occurring before they make a decision on about what to do. So even though they hear the shots, they then go towards the shots and they confirm with their sight. Unfortunately, even though many of them were able to confirm it with their sight, it still delayed a proper response. And we see this is very common in these types of attacks. If we look at the Columbine attack, where the teacher that heard the shots and then she went out into the hallway to see it, and then even though she saw the shooting taking place, she couldn't accept the crisis because she said she thought at this point it was a video production. And really what is occurring in these cases is people don't think that's what's occurring. They're hoping that's what's occurring, and they're actually denying the crisis. And one of the things we say frequently is in order to assess the crisis, you have to accept the crisis. And when sooner you can accept the crisis, then we can determine what the proper response is. And we saw this in the concert hall, where people heard the shots, or they actually saw what was occurring, but they thought it was part of the show. Or we see it in an attack in a church, where they thought it was part of a skit at the church, or an attack at a school, where they thought it was a drill, or they thought it was a video production like what we saw in Columbine. It's very natural responses, but absent training, these natural responses can put us in much greater danger.
So it sounds like a couple of things are going on there. One is we want to be able to rely on sight, but this is a situation where if you're close enough to see, you're close enough to be killed or hurt badly. And then the second thing is it's as if the psychiatric network in your brain almost throws a breaker switch. It says, I can't handle this, so I'm going to believe something that will allow me to maintain continuity. This is just too great of a danger to accept. And what you're saying is we've got to be able to use our other senses other than just sight, and we have to overcome this desire to deny reality. Those scenarios you gave were just bizarre, that would be that a church would have some kind of a shooting as part of a drama. But again, that's what our mind tries to tell us.
Yeah, we actually call it overcoming the big D. That big D is denial. The idea that this can't be happening, it has to be something besides this. Even though our explanations for what is happening are very irrational, we just have a difficulty in accepting the crisis.
Now, let's look at the venues that these attacks happened in. over the weekend. All of them public venues, cafes, a concert hall, a stadium. And the application for us, as we're heading into a busy holiday season where there will be crowds everywhere, where you shop, entertainment venues, what kind of special vigilance do we need to have as we're entering into public places? And obviously we don't want to be paranoid, but we want to have some degree of diligence.
Absolutely, and I guess I want to emphasize that the most is we're not going to allow these attacks or these types of attacks to dictate the venues that we go to and to become hermits and prisoners in our own home or own places that we worship or places that we work. So we're not going to allow it to affect our behavior to that point that we're just going to become loners, because that's exactly what these attackers want. They want to strike terror to the point that it affects our behavior. But at the same time, if knowing that the attackers they like to pick these locations because they are soft targets. They don't have access control. We have large numbers of people present. They don't have to be accurate when they shoot. If you look at the concert hall in Paris, when the attackers were on the elevated balcony, all they had to do was shoot down into the crowd and they could be assured that they were going to hit people. And that's exactly what occurred. They lobbed hand grenades and they were shooting at masses of people down in the crowds and even next to them as well. And those same sorts of occurrences that occurred at the diners in Paris and can occur in a classroom in schools. Is they pick these areas that are soft targets, and on top of that, they pick areas where they can shock the conscious, where the number of victims and the types of victims will just shock the conscious of the nations and our world overall.
And apart from really acts of terror, it only makes sense for us to be self-aware as we're entering into large crowded places, if nothing else, just a strange person who might be off to the side, or even just an incident of petty theft, or just keeping track of your children. It's a good habit to cultivate, in addition to the fact that it may mitigate against some kind of great disaster.
Yeah, and it's just something as simple. We call it if-then decision making. If this occurs, then I will do this. And just asking yourselves 3 simple questions. If this type of attack were to occur at the location I'm at currently, how would I lock out this location? How would I get out of this location? And God forbid, if I have no other way to get out or lock out, how could I take out or fight back? And encouraging folks and giving them permission to fight back and letting them know it is okay to fight back if you have no other choice. So that's really what we're talking about here, just be thinking that way. I'll just give you a quick example. Me and my wife went to a movie a couple weeks ago, and we were in a crowded movie theater. And she has learned to be very aware as she goes from point A to point B. And one of the things she noticed even before I did is a gentleman, it was assigned seating in the movie theater. You had an assigned seat on your ticket. And she noticed a gentleman that was moving from seat to seat as people came into the movie theater to sit in the seat he was sitting in. But she also noted he was carrying a backpack. And so she had let me know what she observed was occurring. I actually went and let management know. And as it turned out in this case, he was up to no good in terms of wanting to see a free movie, but he didn't have anything bad in his backpack. But that sort of awareness is really important when you go out in public.
Excellent thoughts. Well, as we wind down here, a positive story. This is from last summer, also related to France. 3 Americans were on a train headed from Amsterdam in the Netherlands to France, and they heard what they thought were gunshots. Then they heard glass breaking. Then they saw 2 employees run by, and then they actually saw a gunman. Now, we do want to issue the caveat here that these were trained military men, though I don't know if they necessarily were still in active duty. But they immediately attacked the attacker and subdued him. And the quote that came out of the report was, "And the 3 of us beat him until he was unconscious," which is very straightforward, but what needed to be done, unfortunately. And a quote from Alex Skarlatos, who was on the scene and one of the subduers, he said, "We did what we had to do. You either run away or fight. We chose to fight and got lucky and didn't die." So are there any lessons for us in the way that, especially that they listened and were attuned to the initial sounds and things that they couldn't see?
Yeah, the very heroic actions on their part, and their actions saved a lot of lives, there's no doubt. One of the things that they took action, they chose to fight, and they had no other choice, it appears. They had no ability to lock out the attacker, no ability to get out. So one of the things we tell people that they actually did is, if you're going to get beat, you get beat doing something. Don't get beat hiding underneath a desk, or get beat hiding underneath the chair in a train, or your seat in a train. Get beat doing something. And as actions, remember that attacker picked that location because he perceived there would be a large number of people there that wouldn't fight back, that would be good little victims for them. And when the attacker actually became the person that was being attacked, you can see the kind of success they had. It's not something we advocate as something you do every time, but as a last resort, if you have no other choice, absolutely. You may get beat, but get beat doing something. Don't get beat doing nothing. Whether it's in the train, whether it's in your school classroom, whether it's in the parking lot, if somebody's trying to victimize you in your parking lot, that's the right mentality that was obviously successful for them and saved a lot of lives.
And of course, the ideal situation is if you can simply lock the person out, make the phone call and wait. Nobody gets hurt that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lock out, get out, take out. That's what we preach as the 3-out response model. And not necessarily in that order, depending on what kind of threat you're presented with. And as we say frequently to the people that we train and consult with, is we hope everything you learn is a complete waste of time.
And since we do live in a dangerous world, it's important that you as an individual, as families, and especially those who are given the responsibility of protecting and nurturing people, churches, schools, workplaces, and other institutions. If you do not have a plan, Strategos is here to educate, and to equip, and let us know how we can be of service.
Okay, thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Vaughn.